So you're a brand new owner of a carnivorous plant. You're full of excitement, you're full of anticipation. It finally arrived in the mail, you've got it, and now you don't know what to do. This is an exciting time for new growers, but it's also a time of angst. Even growers that have been growing for a while will always feel that twinge of angst whenever they get a new plant. How will it acclimate to your conditions? How will it grow for you? And are you going to be able to give it the right care? Well, in today's video, I'm going to try to unravel a lot of those questions and try to ease a lot of that angst for you as we cover what to do when you get your new carnivorous plant. So this is step one in getting a new carnivorous plant. And you've noticed there's no plants yet. I haven't shown you any, which I will be here shortly. That is because step one is preparing, educating yourself what you're going to purchase before you actually make the purchase. A lot of times buying plants tends to be a sort of spontaneous move, and that's perfectly fine. And if you happen to find a carnivorous plant at let's say a farmer's market or something like that, be spontaneous. But if you're buying online, you've got plenty of time to do your research. And I highly recommend that you do so, specifically when it comes to carnivorous plants. Understand what your conditions are and match those to the plants that you can grow. Now, how you can do this is either using resources like this video or my channel or a different channel, going online and going to Google or reading articles. You don't need to get a PhD in this knowledge, and you don't need to really deep dive too much, but you want to get an idea of what you're going to have so you can best set yourself up for success. So if you don't have the conditions, let's say, to grow a Darlingtonia californica, then you're going to want to stay away from those until you can get those conditions. If you're new to plants and you want to start off with something easy, you might want to consider something like a Drosera or a sundew. If you got a little bit more intermediate experience, you might want to try a Nepenthes. But let's just assume that you've already done all the necessary research. You're ready to go, you think you know what you can grow, and you make the purchase. So what's step number two? This is, again, one of the more boring steps. This is before you receive the plant, but it is key to ensure that you don't buy your first, have it die on you, and then get completely burned out. So I'll keep step number two short, that way we can get into the actual plants. Hopefully you're still with me on this. This is very important. Step number two is preparing your growing area. Whether that's a windowsill, whether that's a grow tent like this one, whether it's a greenhouse, you need to decide where you're going to have this plant live. This is key. It's very important that you understand the environment for this plant, not just for the now, but what the environment will be for the future. A lot of these plants can live for a very long time. Venus flytraps can live up to 20 years. So if you give it the proper care, it's going to be in your life for a very long time. So you've done the research, you understand what plant best fits your needs and what you can give it. But maybe there's a little extra, like a humidity. So you go online and you buy a humidifier. Make sure that you have your setup ready to go before the plant arrives. This sounds daunting and sounds like it's a lot to cover, but it really is not. These plants don't need a whole lot of special care. They just need particulars in their care. And we'll go over that throughout this video, but I want to show you some plants so that you can see what it looks like when you get your first ones in, and then we'll cover media afterwards. But to leave you off on this section is this. Make sure that you find out what your plant needs and provide that. If you're going to grow it in a windowsill, perfect. Just have it set up that you can provide some humidity, ambient humidity, or buy a plant that doesn't require as much humidity. Make sure you have it in a good windowsill that gets good light, but not too much light. And if you don't get enough light, make sure that you have ways to provide extra light, whether it be in an LED grow light. All right, let's get to the plants. What I have in front of me is a relatively new truncata. Now, this is actually pretty good size. So this one's been in the grow tent for a little bit. When you receive your truncata, it will be much smaller than this, or if you receive any plant, for the most part, it will be much smaller than this. You can buy them in different sizes, but the fact still remains that they require the same care once they arrive. Now, depending on where you're getting your plant, it's going to be sitting in the mail from anywhere up to a few days to even a week, or if you're getting them across seas, could be a couple weeks. And so they are going to be light starved, and they are also more than likely going to be dry, and the traps are going to be empty of their fluids. It may look kind of ragged with different leaves that have dried out or the pitchers are falling off. Side note, almost always your pitchers will fall off. Not always, but almost always your pitchers will fall off due to stress. So don't get stressed out about that if you've taken the care of your plant and the pitchers fall off. So what do you do with a plant like this now that you've got it in and it is light starved and it is dried out? How do you care for it? First thing you're going to want to do is acclimate the plant to your growing conditions. Now, a lot of these growers have these plants in close to 100% humidity, or at least 85%, and they grow them in very bright light with a ton of air circulation. You may not be able to provide these professional grade conditions for your plants, and so it is going to be imperative that you provide them with that care. Now, how do you get humidity that high if you don't have a professional setup? That you're going to use what's called bag acclimation. And it is as simple as it sounds. You're going to take a Ziploc bag, place your plant inside of it, and close the bag completely. Leave it in there for about a week or two, and as the week progresses, you're going to slowly start opening the bag. Maybe after a day or two, open it just a little bit of the way. It's a 25, 50, 75, and 100% rule. So 25% of the bag opened at first, then 50%, then 75%, and then 100%. And then after about 2 weeks, you can take it out of the bag completely. So why is this step important? It's important because it allows your plant the opportunity to acclimate under the conditions most likely where it was in its current growing state to what your new growing conditions are. It will also allow the plant to not get stressed out in a new environment right away. A lot of these plants, being so young, are going to get stressed out pretty easily in their transport. So we want to do whatever we can to reduce that amount of stress, and acclimating them, like I have mentioned, will help out a lot. Now, there's a second reason that we want to put them in a bag, and I'll talk about that right now. Placing your plant in a bag not only helps with acclimation, but it also helps to quarantine your plant. Now, hopefully you've bought from a reputable source, but all growers, whether they're 35 years into the experience or 2 years into the experience, will from time to time be plagued by pests. It's an inevitable when you're growing carnivorous plants, just like any other plants. And by keeping it in the bag will allow you to watch the plant while it's acclimating to whether or not you need to quarantine or treat it. This is a very important step. I know we get very excited and we want to introduce the new plant to the group, and we want to get them in there right away. But the last thing you want to do is take all that time and energy that you put into growing your other plants and then put them at exposed risk to a potential threat from the outside because we didn't do our due diligence. So I just talked about pests, and I want to put in this little excerpt, if I can, what to do if you have pests. Now, I've got other videos on that, but I'll touch on it briefly here. So you've got your plant acclimating, and you notice that you've got either thrip or aphids or something going on in your plant. Don't freak out. First thing you can do is contact the supplier and let them know that, not only for professional courtesy for them, but they might be able to either refund you or send you a new plant. But you have this plant, it doesn't spell doom for that plant. You can use things like neem oil, as long as it's organic with no extra additives, or you can use a bonide treated insecticide. I use Captain Jack's because it's all organic. It's very important that you make sure that what you're getting is organic and not high in minerals. If you do get neem oil and it's the concentrated one, you want to make sure that you do about a teaspoon to a tablespoon per gallon. Now, neem oil is particularly harsh on bugs and funguses, but it's not necessarily that bad on carnivorous plants, especially Nepenthes. But if you get the kind that's in the spray bottle, you will be fine to spray that directly on the surface of the soil and all over the plant. Whether you're using the insecticide or the neem oil, you want to make sure you get full coverage on the plant. That way you get any sort of eggs that have been laid or any pests that are hiding under the leaves. You're going to want to treat them probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 times before you take that plant out of the bag. And what I recommend is doing so near the time when you are getting to night, whether that's outside or with your grow lights, whatever that time schedule is. That will allow your plant to keep from having any sort of adverse insecticidal burn from any photosensitive activities. Now, the 2 that I gave you shouldn't do that, but it's always good just to be safe. Next thing I'm going to show you is what you can potentially expect after a few weeks of growing a plant. Now, this one is not new by any means, but I'm showing it to you because it is relatable to what you might experience. Now, it is perfectly normal for your Nepenthes to start losing its leaves as it grows. These are vines, and so they will do that. However, this is because this pot dried out too much and that leaf is reacting by dying. This is a likely scenario for your new plant as it has been going through shipment. Now, a good grower will wet the sphagnum moss and then wrap it in saran wrap or seal it some other way to try to keep it as moist as possible. But this is almost always an inevitable that leaves will start acting a little bit grumpy when you first get it in. It is perfectly normal to see something like this, and I see a lot of new growers that start freaking out, which is understandable. But if you see this, this is usually a sign of drying out stress, or could be just a general stress of going on the trip. One thing I mentioned at the very beginning of this video is when you are getting your plant, more than likely, if it's a Nepenthes, the fluid inside the trap will spill out as it is being brought through transit. Now, the pitchers themselves, I talked about earlier, almost always, unless you have a really good setup, will die off on you. And a lot of new growers tend to get very, very nervous about that when they get their plant, thinking that it's something they did. With Nepenthes, just like any other plant, it's usually the aftermath of an event when they start showing signs of stress. So they won't show it necessarily during the trip, the transit, but they'll start showing it afterwards. Now, depending on how hard the transit was, it will show stress then. But for the most part, it will show it afterwards. So, what can you do with these pitchers? Let's say that they're on your plant still when you receive them, which they should be. You can put some distilled water inside the trap themselves. However, you don't want to get in the habit of doing this too much because it will dilute the digestive enzymes in their trap. If you want to keep the plant and help rehydrate it, you can fill the traps up a little bit with water when you first receive the plant. These traps will probably only live for a very short time, but it will help rehydrate the plant, so that is a viable option for you. Now, you're brand new to Nepenthes, you're brand new to carnivorous plants. Let's talk about what care they need, and then we're going to look at some Drosera and how to care for them. So I talked about in the very beginning of this video, what care do you give your plants? Now, carnivorous plants are very easy to take care of. There is a lot of misnomer out there that they are difficult, that they are, something that can only be grown by specialists. Now, for certain, there are certain carnivorous plants that are very difficult to take care of. But the ones like Nepenthes, Drosera, Venus flytraps can be easily grown from regular people like myself and like anybody out there that's just starting out. There are a few things that you need to be able to provide them in order to ensure their success. Number one is media. Now for Nepenthes, you're going to want to do a sphagnum moss, a dried sphagnum moss, with about 50% perlite. You can do live sphagnum moss if you have it. It will keep the plant moist for longer, and just mix in some, what people normally do is take that dried sphagnum moss and the perlite, mix it together, and then use as a top dressing the live sphagnum moss, and that will help keep the plant moist, plus it looks beautiful. You want to use that 50-50 mix. You can use peat moss with a perlite, but with Nepenthes, I found that some of them prefer that, but for the most part, especially the newer ones you're buying, you're going to want the 50-50 perlite sphagnum moss mix. As far as water goes, you're going to want to use either reverse osmosis water, rainwater, or distilled water. Now you can use tap water. You just got to be careful that there isn't a certain amount of minerals in there. And for most new growers, I say start off with distilled water and or rainwater, unless you happen to have a reverse osmosis system. And that's a good way to ensure that your plants will be successful as you're learning new. Now, I will warn you, growing these plants does come with a caveat that you will become addicted to them and they will become a part of your life, which is an amazing thing. But you'll find yourself researching more and more and more and falling more and more in love with these plants. As you do so, you can start looking at ways to collect rainwater and get maybe a reverse osmosis system, or find a way to check the minerals in your water. I'll talk about that in another video. As far as lighting goes, that's part of the preparatory work, understanding what your plant needs. Now, if you're growing something like an Nepenthes Enigma, you don't need a whole lot of light. But if you're growing something like a Venus flytrap or Drosera, which we're going to look at in a minute, you're going to need a lot of light. And so what does that look like? Does that mean it can be grown outside, or can it be grown under very high intense LED lights, or can it be grown on a windowsill? Well, the answer to that question is yes, all the way around. You just need to understand what your plant needs and what you can give it. So in front of you here, you have Drosera that are acclimating. This is Banana variegated dichotoma, and you can see that it's in an old water jug here that I cut the bottom off of. The reason why I've saved this for the last is the care isn't all that different. As far as acclimating, you want to give it about 2 weeks, and you can either use a bag, but I find with Drosera that these old bottles work great because it allows them to grow upright, which is their natural growing condition, but it also allows them to keep that humidity in. Now with Drosera, you're going to want to keep them in water at all times, and so just having them bottled over them like this still allows the media to stay moist because it's sitting in water, and so that moisture is evaporating up through the plant media and then staying trapped inside the bottle. I find that this is the best way, and it's also the cheapest way. There are certain things that you can buy that are made for this, but why do it? Save your money, just get an old gallon jug, cut the bottom off, and you're all set. Now, like I said, it'll take about 1 to 2 weeks for this to occur. It's the same scenario, same type situation as a bag acclimation. You're going to be wanting to look for pests, and you're going to be wanting to look for any signs of stress. Now, be warned, when you do receive your Drosera, almost invariably there will be no dew on the leaves. The dew is created by sunlight, and it's producing sugars that make this, and so it requires a lot of photosynthesis to make that dew. Once it's in transit, normally that dew gets rubbed off on the side of the packaging, and it doesn't have any light to help replenish any of those saccharides. So it's going to have no dew on it more than likely, and more than likely you're going to get melt, as they call it, where the leaves die off. And you can see there in the very back behind that, there's a new one that just got out of acclimation, but you can see how that Drosera leaf is dead. That is due to melt. I just got that one in maybe 3 weeks ago. And so that is a normal occurrence, so don't be stressed out about it. Now with Drosera as well, especially a banana form, they are very fast growing and they grow from their roots. So don't be surprised if they might melt all the way down to the base, but they will come back. They may look dead to you. I have a multifida Evans head back there that had completely gone down to essentially what would have been a hibernacula, except it didn't have one formed. And I kept it, and that is now putting out a flower and new growth. They will also try to flower on you, as that is a stress habit of these plants. When they feel stressed, they will produce flowers to try to help get their populations up. A lot of the Drosera bananas are sterile, so you can cut those stems off. And here's a nice little helpful tip. Those stems can grow new plants, so cut them up into 1-inch pieces and keep them in a moist environment, and you will get new plants. But I'll do that in another video. Now, something like a Nepenthes, like we have over here, you don't have to cut the flower stalks off. They will produce tons and tons of seeds, and they are self-pollinating, so you will get tons of free plants in a relatively short period of time after purchasing. As far as pest control goes, same thing with the Nepenthes. If you start noticing that you have thrip or aphids or any other type of pests on your plant, keep it acclimated like you have in this bottle, but in that case I would remove it and put it in a bag. That way they can't escape into the soil. Very important. They will lay their eggs in the soil, so you want to prevent future generations from being born, so you want to put it in that bag. You can treat it with those 2 insecticides that I gave you, either neem oil or that bonide insecticidal, as long as it's organic. Like I said, I use Captain Jack's. And after 2 or 3 sprays, maybe even 4 or even up to 6 sprays, you will start to notice these insects dying back. And then once you see no more signs of them, you should be free and clear to add them to your collection. So if it seems like what I covered today was relatively sparse in information, it isn't because I lacked any information, it's because it's that simple. Caring for carnivorous plants requires just a little bit more finesse than it would a non-carnivorous plant, but it doesn't require all of these specialist skills that people like to tell you. There's a lot of growers who have never grown carnivorous plants that are wildly successful at growing them just by giving them a little bit of a special treatment. I know that you can do this, and yet you will have success at doing so. I am always available as a resource for you, and I will work tirelessly to help you get to the point where you can grow these things comfortably and continue to increase your collection. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's given you a lot of valuable information. If there's anything that I missed, or if there's questions that you have, please don't hesitate to comment below and I will get you the answer. And if I don't know the answer, I will ask any number of my subject matter expert friends, and I will make sure that we get an answer provided to you promptly. As always, have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I appreciate every single one of you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.